I'm just going to do my best not to laugh every time I look to my right.
That's because you know me.
I know.
What's up, guys? This is Mr. Man coming at you again. Welcome to my channel. I have with me Nick Vandergragt. He's the host or co-host of the Nick and Joe Show. Look it up. I'll put a link in that in my description there. But today we're here because he has an awesome point in terms of his political view. Him and I don't always share the same point of view on things, and that's what's great because we can converse back and forth.
Imagine that.
But it's changed though. Like it's changed in this day and age because
I am making headway. Yes, I'm making headway.
and it's changed because if you don't have the similar political views or views on anything, people tend to separate or the friendship doesn't work anymore in this day and age now. It's the strangest thing.
I think that's more a sign of insecurity.
Yeah,
I think a lot of our social problems come from people who are very insecure. They don't have self-confidence. They lack self-confidence in what they believe. Therefore, anything that threatens their worldview must be seen as an attack because they're not confident enough in what they believe to withstand criticism.
So that being said, we know that. How do you produce that to someone or introduce it to someone without saying now you're whatever it is, genderizing me or not, whatever the case is? You know, everything is now seen as a reason to be up in arms.
Well, first of all, you have, and I know this is an overused term, but you have a bunch of snowflakes.
Absolutely. Yeah, don't disagree with that one.
People who, because they lack self-confidence, they cannot handle when someone doesn't pat them on the head and say, you're a nice little boy. Take the gender issue as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you use my preferred pronouns, then obviously you disrespect me and you are some kind of phobic, which is utter nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
You're either a man or woman, that's all there is to it. And I can prove that with a simple blood test. Because you can deny reality, but you can't deny biology.
It's interesting. I heard somebody once say that 100 years from now, your body's decayed, you're in the ground.
They'll know whether you're a man or a woman.
Exactly, and doesn't matter what psychologically what you thought.
Right.
I don't. Go ahead.
I was just going to say your sexuality is located here, not below the belt.
Yeah. Anyways, let's just jump into this.
Yeah.
Let's just get into it. So let's
Sure.
I don't have any particular questions. I just want to have an open conversation and forum like we usually do. So Pierre Poilievre.
We just watched the clip on him. And I like Pierre. I've met him a number of times. I'm not going to say he's on my Christmas card list, and I don't get, regular phone calls or updates from his office by any means.
Not yet.
Well, if he wants to appoint me to the Senate, I'll take it. I'll work 73 days. That's because the limit is 72 to be a senator. You got to show up 72 days, so I'll give you more than the minimum.
I like that. In
yeah,
aviation,
that's right.
You like when you meet or exceed regulations.
Meet or exceed, that's right. Yeah, always offer more than you promise.
Yeah.
Under promise and over deliver. That's
exactly
me.
what it is. Yeah.
That's right. So, but I can say that I have been to social functions with him. I knew him when he was a very young politician. For those who don't know, I was a talk show host in Ottawa for years on CFRA there in Ottawa, or what I lovingly refer to as terrestrial radio. And I had my own show. I did the Nick at Night show. I did the Sunnyside Nick show. I filled in for all the hosts, the mainstream hosts, Lowell Green, Steve Matley, you name it. I did every show on that radio except for the morning drive because I was not a good morning person. My brain doesn't kick in till about 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Are you one of those coffee guys? I need my coffee. Don't talk to me.
Nah, there's a bunch of garbage that circles around coffee. Like, coffee keeps me awake all night. I have to drink the caffeine. No, you've programmed yourself psychologically that if I have a coffee now, I'll wake up at 2 a.m. Well, guess what?
Do I need to bring that mic closer? Or is that loud enough?
I don't know. Let's move it over here. There we are. There's a mic. For those who are watching this and don't understand, there's a microphone right here that we're using. So we'll have to check this later and make sure that everything worked out okay. Anyway, the whole point about coffee is that it's a psychosomatic. At least I believe it is, because I can have a coffee at midnight, go to and sleep all night, and sleep like a baby.
I think that's more in terms of habit itself. Like in
Yeah.
terms of that, you'd be a creature of habit, and you've had coffee, so your body's gotten used to that. For myself, I don't drink coffee at all. So if I had it, I'm sure the effects would have a different effect on me.
Well,
You know.
it does contain not nicotine, caffeine, and caffeine is a drug, so there's probably going to be side effects from it. It's just, let me put it this way: from my perspective, in my experience, coffee does not keep me awake at night, other than if I have to go to the bathroom. Okay, when you reach my age, going to the bathroom becomes a more frequent thing.
It's almost like you're training for something, huh?
I'm not ready for the diaper yet. Sorry. Not going there. Not going there. Nope, nope. I'll change my own diaper. Thank you very much.
But yeah, you were telling me that Pierre Polyev had set up
Yes.
my guy JT for a solid punchline here.
Oh, yeah. For those of you who haven't watched it, go online and find the clip where Pierre Polyev calls Justin Trudeau. And for the international audience, if you don't know, Justin Trudeau is our Prime Minister, and Pierre Polyev is the head of the Queen's official opposition. And they spar back and forth in the House of Commons. And Justin Trudeau is not very well liked, and Pierre Polyev is probably going to be our next Prime Minister.
More than likely.
Well, I'm pretty sure he is.
Yeah. Without a
So-
doubt, almost.
Even setting conspiracy theories aside, I think the country's done with our Lord and Master JT, as I affectionately call him. The only thing he's really qualified to do is to be a used socks salesman. That's about the only thing he's good at.
Why would you put down sock salesman though?
Yeah, that's a good point. Why
Used
would I
socks.
do that?
I mean, okay.
I don't know many of them.
I have friends. Well, I have friends right now. They're out in Mexico, and they, for instance, sell like half-used bottles of like sunscreen.
Tequila? Oh,
No, like sunscreen. Like say you and I go. We're not rich or wealthy by any means.
Right.
But we would go, and chances are we wouldn't bring this bottle of sunscreen home. We just leave it there. So somebody else would have taken that, bringing it to.
I had no idea.
Yeah, I just found that today, man.
I didn't know. That is completely new information to me. Who's going to buy a half-used bottle of sunscreen?
Yeah, out in like Mexico, a third world country. If you
I suppose better than
They
getting
would do that.
barbecued.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Justin today, in the clip we watched today, Justin absolutely destroyed our Prime Minister by calling him a doorknob, and the whole legislative assembly, known as the House of Commons, exploded in laughter because he was talking about infrastructure programs and building homes, taking old government buildings. There's 37,000 of them. And he said, why not take 10 or 15%, turn them into low-rent housing, or not low-rent housing, but housing along high-density corridors where seniors and young people can get established before they move on to single-family dwellings. And why don't they want to do that? Justin Trudeau jumped to his feet and said, well, we do that. We've been doing that. What are you talking about? We love that idea. Well, as a matter of fact, it was, and he mentioned doorknobs, okay, in his rebuttal, which was just plain, he teed himself up perfectly. So when Justin Trudeau was done, time for Mr. Polyev to respond, he stood up and said, well, apparently the first social infrastructure program that the Liberal government decided to act on was to put a doorknob in the Prime Minister's office. And it was absolutely brilliant. And it was, laugh. How can you not laugh at that? And Justin Trudeau he's in...
It took me a second to catch up with it. Like I follow politics, not as much as Nick does, but it took me a second and the laugh gradually came in. However,
Yes.
in the back of my, actually no, I'm lying, in the forefront of my mind, I still know that Pierre Polyev had gone through the Global Young Leaders, whatever it is, with the World Economic Forum. I understand that you guys have, I don't know what your working or active relationship is like, but in terms of what used to be on the World Economic Forum's webpage, Pierre Polyev is there.
Okay.
So,
The key word there is used to be. He
Okay.
has multiple times in the last 2 years denounced the World Economic Forum and disavowed himself of any membership of it, and has gone so far as to say any member of his cabinet who is a member of his, once he forms government, who is a member of the Economic Forum will be asked to stand down from the World Economic Forum, or he will relieve them of their position.
But okay, so you can say that, but these individuals are wordsmiths, though, right?
True, and I
they
understand
can
that
be
too.
very, very direct in what they're saying, and I'm saying this and that. I'm not talking about this in the middle here. For instance, yeah, I denounced that World Economic Forum. Okay, because you're not on the website anymore. What about them do you denounce? What about that learning experience or that phase in your life that you had learned? Are you denouncing? Like it's non-specific.
Let me give you what I would think would be the correct answer. It is better to keep your enemies close and your friends closer.
I don't know, man. I don't know.
Look, first of all, if you had a chance to be a spy working against the Nazis in the 1930s, and you had to act like a Nazi at the time to gain the information necessary to defeat them in the long run, would that not be a good idea?
It can be, yes, it can be.
Right.
Depending on who you are affiliated with.
So what we don't know, the thing we cannot know, is, was that his attitude?
But that's still speculation, though. Right?
Exactly. That's my point.
So I'm just going based off of what I know and learned about the World Economic Forum himself. Klaus Schwab, Justin Trudeau.
Now,
what's the
here's
Bill Gates working with it. They have the whole world, the One World Initiative within that. And just because Pierre Poilievre doesn't openly now in the public's eye, in terms of the snippets and clips that we see, subscribe to that. But I mean, there are other shots and clips and whatnot of him which he made that we just don't see or haven't seen yet. And again, that's all.
Well, trust me, if the CBC or the mainstream media could find clips like that, they would dig it up and they'd plaster it all over the media. Because let's face it, when you go around saying, I am going to defund the CBC makes you enemy number one, especially if you're in a position to actually do that.
Didn't Trudeau bail out the CBC, CNN, and all these other
$630 million.
So that's why it all.
And you know what he said about it?
Are those companies bought by the liberal government at that point, or the government in general, which would put Pierre Poilievre into that as well?
No, well, first of all, when it comes to things like that, and I'm not making excuses, and I'm not trying to be a homeboy for Pierre, because if he says or does something we don't like, or I don't like, I will certainly call him on it. I like what he says because I think it's common sense and it's good for the country. It's like he's been calling for the closing of Roxham Road as an example, where the illegal immigration has been taking place, and we've had hundreds of thousands of people pour over our borders, and then given all kinds of benefits for being here, even though they are illegal immigrants. They use irregular because they don't like the word illegal. As soon as they use the word, when I say they, I'm talking about the mainstream media and the government of the day.
Yeah, that's just kabuki theater, man. That's all.
Of course it is. Absolutely. They're trying to avoid the court cases that would flow from that. Okay, if they call it, because now if you call them illegal, you have to charge them. So irregular, this is the game. You talk about wordsmithing. This is exactly what they do.
Irregular.
Yeah, they call them irregular. Of all the stupid things, they're not irregular. They're illegal.
She's not a hooker. She's a day walker, man.
Right. She's a sex worker. She's a prostitute. We get caught up in worrying more about the feelings of the people who are doing the damage than we are about the victims of that damage. So he's been calling for, Pierre Poilievre, has been calling for the closing of that portal through our border for years. Joe Biden shows up this week in Ottawa, and all of a sudden, boom, border's closed. You know why? I'll tell you why. Because Justin Trudeau knows he's in trouble. And he's going to have to go to the polls sooner rather than later, and he does not want his record hauled up without some kind of ability to say, yeah, well, we dealt with that. Yeah. Just before you drop the writ. Yeah. You made a deal with another devil another devil called Joe Biden. I call him Sleepy Joe. Only guy I know who can fall upstairs 3 times in the same video clip
Going up into a plane.
into the Air Force One. Okay, I don't like Mr. Biden's no better than Mr. Trudeau. You can toss a coin to get which one's worse, and you come down right either way. So all of this is theater. It's all designed to try to give Justin Trudeau a better chance at getting reelected, because no matter what organization is behind the scenes, as long as we have the ballot box, and we still do a paper ballot in this country, which makes it much harder to cheat.
Didn't you see the Liberals were doing that? They were cheating. They were stuffing ballots.
Yeah, but it's a lot harder to do.
There's video of a guy going in, grabbing ballots and removing names. And
oh yeah, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I'm saying it's not like down in the States where Trump had the election stolen from him.
Yeah, for sure. But this is where the whole artificial intelligence and AI comes in now, and where cryptocurrency and immutable blockchain technology comes in at this point now. You have the immutable ledger where nothing can be deleted, and mark my words, there will be this that happens. This exists. This is going to be implemented very, very soon.
Well, as long as we have the paper ballot, and anyone who wants to fight for their country without having to pick up a rifle and wear a uniform should resist with every ounce of their being the switch to electronic ballot. Those are far too easily manipulated. And the best example is what happened south of the border the last election. I don't think Joe Biden got 81 million votes, not in your wildest dreams. Do I like Trump? Well, I like him better than Biden. Trump's a lot of things. He's bombastic. He's loud. He's all the bad stereotypes about Americans that we hear about all the time. And no disrespect to the American listeners to this podcast. But there were a lot of things about Trump that really like the texting and the tweeting. Oh my God! If I was his public, what's the word I'm looking for?
PR, public rep.
Public relations guy, I'd drop his cell phone through a shredder.
Because so you don't think all this is just political theater to get to people going? Because
some of it is.
People move. I think all of it is, man. Like they all gone to the same acting school.
Well, remember something. Never assign to conspiracy what you can explain with stupidity.
But the thing is, how do you determine what conspiracy is? Like
that's part of the problem.
But you can say your piece, and that could, because you have it from an experience point of view, and because of you have this source and that source. And again, I can do the opposite as well. Or anybody can, but it can be done.
But therein lies the problem. It's the devil in the details. There are all kinds of wild conspiracies out there. Everything from who shot JFK to Area 51 and on down the list. Okay? There are all kinds, like Dwight D. Eisenhower's famous quote, "Beware the military complex." Okay? What context was that set in? Does anybody know?
What is the military complex?
Well, all the industries that feed the military and live off the military is what I take that to mean. Now, and to a certain extent, he's right. Don't let the military complex run your government. Okay? It should be the government deciding through foreign policy what kind of military you're going to have by having some kind of idea of what your foreign policy is going to look like. What do we do if somebody invades a foreign country? Russia, are you listening? Okay. What's our response going to be? And if we are going to have a response, what equipment do we need and what kind of personnel do we need in order to respond effectively to that particular scenario? That's the way that military should be designed. So he was cautioning us not to allow the military to lead. Like, don't let the tail wag the dog, in other words.
So I guess we're just expanding on your tail wagging the dog. I think the military itself is the tail, and you have the head of the dog as the banking. I believe all these wars are created or fabricated to move the people, because people move and markets move based on fear and emotion. If you can get the mass people to do something unitedly or collectively, then you can get an outcome you want. Because there's an open war, physical war within our lives, but behind the scenes, all these bankers, these central bankers, Christine Lagarde, Christina Georgiev, you have the Russian central bank, you have the Ukraine National Bank, you have the ECB, you have the BOA, you have
Don't
Bank of
forget the
Canada,
European Union.
MAS. Like you have them all in the background working together. You know, I spent hours, as we were talking about off camera, sorry, hours just watching these guys talk together, how they collaborate, how they say we're all working together, and blah blah blah, and connecting that to the war right now. Nothing creates as much money as war does. So you can flood this world right now with all this money, and then they can have reasons to pump out more money at that point. So they're going to flood the ecosystem and devalue the dollar itself. With the dollar devalued, you can bring in a new financial system, and that's what this is all about.
Well, here's my thoughts on that are, I'm not denying that. There are scenarios like, again, going back to the idea of conspiracy theories. In World War II, Japan attacked the United States on December 7th, 1941.
Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, absolutely. That's not the only thing Japan attacked. That's the only one that gets talked about. They attacked all over the Dutch West Indies, and they attacked a base in Ceylon, which got defeated, by the way, by the British.
If I can stop you for a second there. So when did Japan say you say that they invaded 1941 Pearl Harbor?
They didn't invade, they attacked.
They attacked. Okay, so 10 years prior to that, wasn't there not the war with Germany, correct? And then in 1929 there was a stock market collapse, wasn't there?
Okay, well let's go back.
Yeah.
Let's go back. The first stock market in modern history collapse took place in 1920.
Yep.
That's where
Black
I believe
Monday.
Black Monday.
Yep.
And Calvin Coolidge, probably one of the best presidents the United States has ever had, decided that the government's role in that was going to be that he would close his office door and unplug his phone and let the market sort it out. And they did. And from 1920 to 1929, what did they call that decade? Do you remember?
The Roaring Twenties.
Why did they call it the Roaring Twenties?
That was the gold rush.
Absolutely. The market went crazy.
Yeah.
They corrected the problem, and there was more wealth generated in a shorter period than at any other time in human history.
But we're going through that now, except it's heavily manipulated.
Okay, well, you're getting ahead of me.
Okay.
Okay.
I hear you.
So 1929 comes along, we have the same problem. What's the government's response this time?
And that, I'm not sure.
Well, the president of the day, I think it was Hoover. I stand to be corrected on that, but let's say it's J. Edgar Hoover, decides, who is a hardcore socialist, okay, that the only way out of this mess is for the government to spend money it doesn't have. And they begin massive public works programs. They build the Hoover Dam. They do all kinds of different things. The interstate highways didn't come along till Dwight D. Eisenhower for Cold War reasons. So that's not part of it. But the Erie Canal, all kinds of different projects got started in order to put people back to work. The problem was they were being paid and they were being funded by generating massive deficits because the government was spending taxation that hadn't come in yet, which is what we call deficit spending. That's where our debts come from on a national scale. Okay, so he made the Depression worse and longer than it needed to be. If he'd left it alone, it would have self-corrected like it did in 1920, and there would have been no worldwide depression. Now, the worldwide depression, the other thing to keep in mind about that is that the more money you produce, the less value it has. Mm-hmm. If you have, let's say I have this particular glass here. It's the only one in town, and everybody wants it. Mm-hmm. I can charge whatever I want for it, and I'll get it. Okay, but if there's 1,000 of these, all of a sudden now market forces come into bear, brings the price down. Because if I charge too much, the customer will say, too much money, I'll go across the street, and I'll buy it there for half that price. So it forces competition to keep the prices down. And that's what didn't happen in the 1930s. There was a very famous case in Switzerland. I'll say Europe, where a leading economist was asked by the European powers how to prevent this particular disaster from befalling them, this upcoming depression. They saw it coming. And he said, meet me right at this address, right outside their national mint where they printed their paper money at midnight. So they all showed up, and he's standing there, and they said, well, okay, why are we here? He said, you hear that sound in the background? And you could hear the print working. And he says, you need to shut that off. You need to stop printing money. They didn't listen, and boom, you had a worldwide depression.
And that's all by design. And we're going through that now. What happened 50 years later? It's like it's a 50-year cyclical.
That's the history, though, and that's why I'm not denying anything you're saying. I'm just saying that in this case, this is what happens when you have far more of the more you have of something, the less value each individual unit of that something has.
And so that being said, I want to expand on that. It's interesting to see where life is going because U.S. being the reserve currency, at the pace at which they're devaluing it, and then you have these global banks right now, global systemic banks, just sitting there under pressure with all these economic forces right now, and it's been forecasted that a lot of these might. I'm not going to say collapse. I don't know if they're going to collapse. They are over leveraged for sure.
Well, they've had 3 in a week.
Those are the smaller banks.
Silicon Valley, how small was that?
Silicon Valley, it's like a charter bank. It's not a huge like global systemically important bank like J.P. Morgan, Bank of Canada.
Yeah.
You know, so you have those in terms of cryptocurrencies. Those are the banks that could play around with like the on off ramp of cryptocurrencies. You couldn't get a bank like something like Bank of America or Bank of Canada, the central banks, to go and take some of their money and allocate it to this without something happening. You know, something huge happening. And a lot of these smaller companies had exposure to FTX and lost money in that. And I'm not sure whose executive order it was, but you could see the reserve that banks need to hold gradually diminishing over time. And now they're not required to hold anything as a balance within their banking ecosystem at all. So now they can, anytime money comes, it goes. It's invested to try and make money. So if you want to get that money you just deposited back out, you have to wait 3 to 5 business days. They got to pull it from different sources and make calls and connection and whatnot.
Well, this is what happened when we moved off the gold standard. This is why I find it interesting they're moving back to the gold standard.
You see that too?
Yes, of course.
Elaborate on that, please.
Well, first of all, the whole point of the gold standard to begin with was to make sure that the money actually had real value. You had $1 worth of gold and you had a $1 bill, and those two were tied together. And as long as we were on the gold standard, that was the case. But was it John F. Kennedy? So it must have been Lyndon Johnson after him who took us because he wanted to stay on the world standard, on the gold standard. And people who didn't agree, I'm not saying this is why he was assassinated. I don't believe, I think there's a lot of holes in the Lee Harvey Oswald scenario.
Oh, I'd love to go down that with you one day.
That's one day, okay. But for right now, I don't know that I put too much weight in that. There was a lot at play behind the scenes, as is always the case, in these big government decisions. I will tell you this much about the death of John F. Kennedy. There's a Canadian connection. And the Canadian connection is this. He didn't really like Lester B. Pearson, who was prime minister at the time, I believe, because Steve the Chief had already been defeated. And that's, for those who don't know, that's John F. Diefenbaker, who was our prime minister during most of the 1950s. So in the 60s, it's Lester B. Pearson, who is our prime minister, and they don't get along too well. But John F. Kennedy decided he was going to come to Canada, and the tradition for a national leader, when they come to Canada, they plant a maple tree at Rideau Hall. So he took a silver spade, he dug the hole, put the tree in, and buried it and planted it. What people didn't know at the time was John F. Kennedy was not a healthy man. He had health problems, he had back issues, and he injured his back when he planted the tree, which meant he had to wear a brace. After that, he goes to Dallas. The reason why he couldn't fall forward like most people under those circumstances would have fallen forward was because he was wearing a brace that he had to wear after he hurt his back in Ottawa.
So would the falling forward cause an
Well, the
issue,
fall
or he just couldn't
he
fall
wouldn't have
forward?
his head would not have been available for the second and third shot. He would have fallen forward and his head would have been out of the line of sight. So whether that would have made a difference, I don't know. But that's the Canadian connection. He was wearing a brace he had to wear because he injured himself in Canada planting a maple tree.
I can look into that.
Just a little bit of history for
That's
you.
interesting.
Yes, it is.
It definitely adds to the dynamics of what's out there.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well, the more
it's
about
interesting.
history you know, the more you can understand what's going on now.
The more I know, I have this recognition, the less I actually know in the grand scheme of things. Like,
Oh, well, what's that old saying? The more I think I know, the more I find out I don't know.
yeah.
You know,
that
or the
sounds
high.
like-
What is it? There's something about a ladder. The higher on the ladder of learning I go, the more I realize I don't know, or something like
Yeah.
that. I forget the phrase exactly, but that was a little slice of history. But John F. Kennedy wanted to stay on the gold standard, and I believe, if my memory is correct, it was Lyndon Johnson who wrote that edict that said we're not going to be on the gold standard anymore.
But it doesn't make sense to me because the amendment itself, when they had written the Constitution, I believe it's the Constitution, they had said no other money will be viewed as a currency or money beyond or besides gold and silver. And then you have this now derivative created. And then in 1971, I believe it is, you have Nixon saying, and never, for the economic stability of the U.S., we're going to remove the dollar from the gold standard. And
Okay,
people
maybe
are
it
like,
was Nixon, yeah.
like that makes absolutely no sense in the grand scheme of things.
But a piece of paper, take it the Bill of Rights, take it the British North America Act here in Canada, only has value if people place value on it. In other words, the Americans, and this is something I really admire about them, are fanatical about sticking to their Bill of Rights.
As they should be.
That's what I mean. That's why I'm Canada. We had a Bill of Rights under Diefenbaker. Look it up. Google it.
But it's never left, though.
What's that?
The Bill of Rights is never left. We still have this. One of the founding members who would have written or wrote the Bill of Rights is still alive. And
Yeah.
he's suing
No.
somebody.
That's not the Bill of Rights. You're talking about the Charter of Rights. That's different.
You sure it's the Charter?
Yes. You're talking about the Premier of New Brunswick or Prince Edward Island. He's still alive, and who's involved in writing that with Pierre Elliott Trudeau. I'm talking about John Diefenbaker's Bill of Rights that was in place before the Charter. So we have a Bill of Rights, but nobody pays it any attention. It has no value. Everybody's caught up with the Charter of Rights, which is a horrible document.
I'm sure it's the Bill of Rights I'm talking about, not the Charter. The Charter is definitely like less in terms of value than the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is something to adhere to.
But for people listening to us, go and check out John Diefenbaker's Bill of Rights, not Pierre Elliott Trudeau's Charter. And look, if you want to contrast them, look at them and ask yourself, under which one would I rather live?
I believe that when Trudeau had written the Charter of Rights too, there's some language in there that refers to Canada can only do something unless Quebec does something first. I don't remember what that was.
I'd have to look at that. I'm not sure about that.
It came into my life because the whole fight with the whole vaccines at that point and mask wearing. I was like, I don't remember what it was. But I had my legislations with me, or my regulations, going into stores.
Are you talking about the notwithstanding clause?
No, not the notwithstanding. No. Yeah, I don't remember what it is. I can't.
Because that's a trigger that should get pulled a lot more often. And I have a feeling you'll see Alberta pull it.
In what sense?
That when you're looking at Danielle Smith, who's Premier of Alberta, is a hero of mine. She's our version of Ron DeSantis. She is somebody who has said no to the gun grab by Justin Trudeau. She said no to trespassing on private property to grab soil and water samples to be able to reduce the nitrogen that farmers use to feed their crops with. And so has, I believe it's Saskatchewan, Premier Moe, whatever province he's with, Manitoba or Saskatchewan. I can never remember.
That guy is so sketchy, man. He is so sketchy.
You know what?
He came out with, when COVID was out, he came out with this, oh man, it was this legislation that he'd written, I can't speak to right now, but it was so sketchy. I showed it to the airport manager, and he became concerned too, and he's like, yo, what do we do? It's like, I have no idea, but we should probably connect and talk about this. And that came out from this guy. Also, a lie I caught him in too. Trudeau wants to bring out the digital ID. Apparently,
so does Ontario.
So and then people keep saying that Mo doesn't want this. Mo's fighting against this. However, Mo has already signed on to the Pan Canadian Trust, I believe it's called, Pan Canada Trust agreement, which has Saskatchewan right in there in terms of digital IDs through the company DIACC, I believe it is.
Right.
And they are working exclusively with IBM, and IBM is using the technology Hyperledger Fabric, which has to do with cryptocurrencies. Okay. So all this, it leads back to the conservatives as well that want these things to roll in, because Pierre Poilievre is pro-crypto as well.
Well, he's the one that came out and said you should invest in Bitcoin, and then I think he was ahead of his time.
About Bitcoin, yeah, okay.
Well, I think by Bitcoin, he was talking about cryptocurrencies in general. I can't speak, I don't know for sure that's what he meant, but that's how I read that, is that he was talking, when he said Bitcoin, that's a catch-all phrase. It's like,
why? Why say a catch-all phrase? Why not
because,
say specifics?
Look, why does everybody call butter, no. Let me think.
Like why people call the search engine Google.
Yeah.
Everybody calls the Kleenex and Kleenex. Kleenex is the
or
brand itself.
Q-tips.
Tissue. Yeah.
You know, okay, he's just using a common phrase.
Well, I believe you can only say Bitcoin because Bitcoin has no common entity, no enterprise behind it. So you're not stating a name itself. Well, they can easily just say invest in technology that is connected to or has distributed ledger technology. Why not? Why not?
Flipping over to the political side, you got to remember that of everything else, politicians, Mr. Poilievre included, are people who are crafting words in such a way as to make themselves look more votable for than the other guy. So they're using language that they think everybody understands, and maybe they very easily can get it wrong. Many times they do, but these are wordsmiths working with the English language as we understand it today, and trying to come up with catchphrases. Have you ever noticed whenever he's talking about the carbon tax, he wants to triple the carbon tax?
Okay, well then let me go ahead. Sorry, finish it.
No, I was just saying that or bring it back, bring it home. He's got this 3 brings that he uses. Those are catchphrases. He wants people to, it's like an earworm with music, right? You hear a song and it plays in your head all day. He wants the same thing with this, and he's trying to generate that using that particular language. So I'm thinking Bitcoin, because people think they know what Bitcoin is. It's electronic money. Okay, I think that's the way most people look at Bitcoin, is electronic money. They don't know about Ripple. They don't know about all these other platforms that are out there unless they actually begin to do some homework.
But why not? Why not just say the other cryptocurrency that exists instead of just saying like a blanket statement of Bitcoin and Ether? For
the reasons I just said. Most people won't. Like, people like you and people like me, I'm a news hound, you're a crypto hound, and we go down these rabbit holes. But most people, it glazes over. Why don't people pay attention to politics except for the last 2 weeks before an election?
Well, to make up their mind at that point.
Well, no, they don't care. They just hear the buzzwords and that's all they care about. Most people are not going to take your advice on crypto. They're not going to do it.
That I agree with. That I
Okay.
completely agree with.
And why not? It's not that it's not good advice.
No, it's just it's too much, man. It's too
It's
much learning.
too
It's
much.
too much education.
They just don't want to be bothered.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go again with a doomsday scenario when it's not. But the point is that people won't react to situations until it hits them in two places, in their pocketbook and in their backyard.
And that's the thing, man. There's so many more people I would love to help. But when you talk to people about this, the common saying,
The eyes glaze over, and that's it. They tune out.
It doesn't involve me at all. So
yes, it does involve you, but you got to prove it.
Yeah, and I'm not in this to try and prove anything to people. I'm going to tell you what it is, and you make up your own mind at that
Fair,
point.
and that's completely reasonable. But people today, first of all, you have several things to consider. The ever lowering standard in the world of education.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
that's not, believe me, and that is, I believe that is by design.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
A half-educated population is far easier to manage than either an ignorant or a highly educated.
Yeah.
Because you know enough to be dangerous. You're like the NDP. You know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to be effective.
Have you ever heard of the elephant who will just stay there tied to his little post because even though he could just rip it out and run away.
Right. But once he's tugged on it a couple times and doesn't give when he's a little feller, it stays in his brain.
Yep. He believes he can't do it.
People vote generationally for this, right? For the same reason.
Yeah.
Well, if the Liberals or the Tories or the NDP or the Greens were good enough for my granddaddy, then it's good enough for my daddy. It's good enough for me.
Yeah.
And they never stop to listen to what they sound like when they say that stuff.
Well, everybody in their right mind is right, though, right? Nobody ever wants to be wrong. It takes a strong person to recognize that, you know, I don't have all the answers.
So here's the second part. So a weak education, a complete destruction of personal self-confidence.
Yeah, that's where we're at. That's where we're at.
So, and on top of that, to be almost blindingly ignorant about economics. I had a guy call my talk show once. Rick from, who cares? It was from Ottawa someplace. His first name was Rick. And big time NDP guy. And we were talking about economics. And I said, but who's going to pay for all this stuff? Because he wanted the sky and the moon and everything else, right? I think he was looking for Alpha Centauri too. But anyway, I said, well, who's going to pay for it? He said, what do you mean who's going to pay for it? The government's got all the money. I said, the government doesn't have a dime. Not of its own. Okay? The government has your money. I said, where do you think money comes from that the government spends? He said, oh, that's easy. It comes from the mint.
Oh, my gosh. He has no idea that's his pension fund and everything else that involves
I said, do you realize that what the mint spits out is merely plastic? And the only reason it has value is because you put value in it, and that people in general put value in it, and we accept that as an exchange of wealth. It's a representation of the wealth, not the wealth itself. And he went, no, I don't think so. And I said, let me explain the economy to you in a real short analogy. Let's say you set up a lemonade stand. And you spend $10 on a case of lemons. Okay? So in order for you to make $1, you have to sell a glass of lemonade at $2. It costs you $1 to make that lemonade. The difference between the first dollar and the second is called profit. And that, my friend, is where all the money comes from to run the country. Because that's what the government digs into. It's your profits, it's your income that you generate by selling that glass of lemonade. Okay? And he had no idea what I was talking about.
Really?
Yep.
He doesn't understand the tax implications afterwards.
No.
And then after when he takes that dollar, what was $1, say like 95 cents.
You get to
now,
keep what the government decides you can have left. So 19 cents is yours.
It's interesting that that people just view money as the dollar is $1, and that's all it is, and that's all it does, and they don't understand.
They don't understand how inflation eats into it until they see their pension plans starting to buy less and less and less. Right?
That's the guy that's going to feel a lot of pain through what we're going through.
You
But
got
just to
it.
come back around full circle, as you were
Sure.
talking about now, what brings value to the dollar, and you were talking about the gold standard. How do you see that looking now? Because we're moving from the physical fiat currency, which will still exist through the
Yep.
transition. After the transition, it'll be 100% digital. I don't know how much time you spent looking at it beyond my research that we've spoken about, but like how could that look in terms of a digital representation of it? I'm not sure if you understand the term tokenization. So like you create a like representation of it on the like a virtual ledger that states this is gold, this is gold,
Well,
this is this glass of whiskey, this is the glass, so this is the whiskey in reality right there.
no, we're completely sober, really.
Speak for yourself.
I'm not touching that. Anyway, I'm not sure I know enough about that to give an educated response. All I do know is that things are going to be different 5 years from now than they
Yeah.
are today. And that anyone who is going to continue down the road doing the same things they're doing now, stocks and bonds, I'm not saying those are bad investments, but they shouldn't be the only ones by any stretch. Because companies are still going to have stocks, they're still going to have bonds, there's still going to be investment opportunities that are out there based on the stock market. We were doing a little research before the show today. Stock markets have been around since 1611 back in Holland. This is not new. Okay, what we're going through is not new. It's just new technology is making it happen two things: faster and far more global. Okay, so these kind of things is why I say 5 years. The world in economics is going to look different than it does today. I don't know enough about this to be able to say what it's going to look like. There's too many moving parts. What's our political scenario? Like if Pierre Poilievre does get elected and does cancel the carbon tax and does put Canada first, what's it going to mean for us in this new reality? We don't know. I'm hoping it's going to be a positive thing. That's what I'm counting on. Because what have I got left? What have I got? Where else am I going to go if that doesn't happen?
Nowhere.
Right. So, come on, Pierre is all I can say to this. And if I turn out to be wrong, well, I can't help that. The other thing is, what about the physical money, paper money or plastic money you carry? And by plastic, I don't mean just your credit card. I'm talking about what our money's actually made of is a polymer now. It's not cotton anymore. It's not paper. But that money, the cash you carry in your wallet, how much is it going to be worth? What size is the denominator? Go to Venezuela for a classic. Venezuela's had about a huge, and I mean huge, we're talking in the term of thousands of percent inflation.
When are you talking?
Right now. Okay.
This happened a few years ago too to them. I think another 8 years.
Well, I don't think it ever ended.
Okay, very good point.
They got to a point where, because of what Hugo Chavez was doing down there, where he nationalized. This is why socialism is such an evil poison. Okay, he nationalized everything. Private property. He'd look at a building and say, "Who owns that?" "Oh, it's a business." "Buy it. Shut it down." Everything had to be controlled by the government. Now, the problem with this, people in Canada confuse social programs with socialism. And that's a big mistake. Social programs are things that a free and open democracy decides to take on as a burden for the benefit of the people living within the country, based on their free market economy. Okay, and this, you can argue with me all day if you want, but that's the truth. Because what happens is we are compassionate creatures. Human beings have a compassionate bone in their body. When someone sees someone else struggling or in great need, some people will walk by. Let me take it to a biblical point of view. The story of this Good Samaritan, where he comes across this guy who's been beaten and robbed and stripped and all that stuff, laying in the ditch half dead. Okay, he has compassion for the guy and helps him by taking him to a hotel, looking after him, making sure there's money there for his continued care until he gets back so he can finish up if there's any left over. So this is a story of human compassion. I think it's rooted in reality. I don't know if the story itself is true, but stories like that there's millions of them where people have gone out of their way to help other people who are in need. Okay, so we have done that, incorporated that in our society. That's why we have service clubs, the Knights of Columbus, the Rotary, the Lions clubs. There's a whole list of them. Okay, long before the government ever showed up, we were already doing these things.
But those people are connected to Masons. All those individuals are connected through various channels.
I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, the Knights of Columbus are not.
Not the Knights of Columbus, no.
There's a very good reason for that.
They're the opposite of what
Okay,
these
and
individuals are.
we could spend hours on that too, but generally the point I'm trying to make is that people are by their nature flawed, broken, but compassionate. Generally speaking, you're always going to have bad guys. You're always going to have people who are evil. I don't deny that. But generally speaking, people are compassionate. They're willing to help. I could give you thousands of examples, but I think that much is pretty much true. So I was going somewhere with that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to throw you off your track.
No, I'm trying to think of what it was. Oh, socialism and socialists. Okay, so that's socialistic programs put in place by a particular population to look after members of that population that fall on hard times. That is a very human and noble thing to do. Socialism is where the government controls every aspect of your life. It's a kissing cousin to communism, okay? Where socialism doesn't own everything, it regulates everything. Communism, the government owns everything and doles it out as it sees fit for the good of the state, where the state becomes the god. And this is why it's so destructive, so evil, and over 100 million people have perished in the 20th century because of socialism / communism / Nazism. Those are the three big killers in when I mean that quite literally over the last 20 years and the last 120 years. And this is why we need to fight against socialism in every form. Wherever it rears its ugly head, we need to cut it off. And not enough people understand that. They think that when I'm talking about socialism, I'm talking about their social programs. No, I don't have any problem with helping people up off the street. I don't have any problem with helping drug addicts. I don't have any problem with helping, women who have gone through abortions or women who are pregnant and don't want to go through abortions or things like that. I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. I'm talking about where the government runs every aspect of your life.
So
that's what we have to fight against.
Do you see that showing its head right now in our current day and age? By the way, today is March 26th, 2023.
Yes, it is.
Do you see that happening in our current
all
day
over
and
the
age?
place?
Can you give some examples?
Sure.
Yeah.
So look at what Joe Biden. First of all, let me use some of the biggest contrasts. Trump, under Donald Trump, whether you like him or not, I don't care whether you like Donald Trump as a person or not, or even as a president. When he was in power, energy was cheap, people were getting ahead, taxes were coming down. Under Joe Biden, a socialist, energy is hugely expensive. The standard of living is going down, and they have more social problems than you can shake a stick at. Everything from the southern border to the fentanyl crisis, all of these things are getting worse. So on one hand, you have a capitalist, and on the other hand, you have a socialist. And the two are diametrically opposed.
So if I can add to that, then, when you talk about when Trump was in power, I guess one could argue and say when Trump was in power, he also decreased the interest rates, right? Like the prime rates, the lending rates, they were going down, right? So which made borrowing money a lot easier for people.
No, that happened long before Trump got involved, and that went back to Bill Clinton. Barney Franks, who was a member of the Senate, I think, who got, well, I'm not going to go down that road. I was going to enlighten you with a little bit about Barney Franks, but it doesn't matter now. I don't think he's even alive anymore. But under Bill Clinton, they signed several pieces of legislation that allowed bankers to throw out all the checks and balances that were in place, which led to the housing bubble and the collapse in the U.S. housing market because people who had no business trying to buy a house, they didn't have the income, they didn't have the ability to repay. There's a reason why when you go into a bank and sit down in the old days now, going back 30, 40, 50 years, when they would ask you, you'd had to do what they call an economic stress test. How much what's your debt? They would look at your debt load. They would look at what your income is. They would look at what your prospective income is. They would look at all kinds. You would basically drop your economic pants in front of your banker, and he would take stock of what he had to work with. It's an ugly analogy, I know, but
it's a nice facetious one, though. I can see the picture of what you're.
But you get it, right? You bared your soul in front of the banker in order for him to say, yes, you can have $100,000 or $200,000 or $300,000 to buy this home because we think you have the ability to repay it. But when you take that away, then anybody can get any amount of money they want, well, within reason. They could buy homes. There was never a chance they could repay. So when interest rates did start to go back up again, or they got 90 days or 120 days into their mortgage, and all of a sudden the banks aren't being repaid, things collapse. And at one time, you could buy a whole subdivision, places like Florida, for pennies on the dollar.
We're going there again. We are going there again.
Well,
that's where we're on in terms of these giant.
It won't happen in Florida, but you're
not Florida right now.
No, it'll be in all the blue states.
Yeah.
Because now that they have a decent governor down in Florida, who I really admire.
You talking DeSantis?
You're darn right I am. Mm-hmm. I would love to hire him as a prime minister for about 10 years.
As you say that now, Florida and DeSantis. So one of the guys I follow religiously, I follow this man is Jamie Dimon. He's the, I guess the CEO or the main head guy in JP Morgan. I'm not sure if you follow JP Morgan and Chase Bank much.
No.
But they are setting up shop out in Florida.
Wonder why.
There's zero crypto taxes out there, man. It's super friendly for businesses.
You got it.
So I think that's a strategy of his in terms of, not necessarily survival. I feel like they're going to thrive through this. But that's definitely one of his strategies because he's also set up in Singapore. And I haven't looked into why Singapore. Why
probably because they're very business friendly in Singapore too. But remember something. Being business friendly is not a bad thing.
No, not at all.
Because that's what drives your economy. When DeSantis really knocked it out of the park for me is when he looked at Disney and said, you're all done. You're not going to have this special status anymore. You're going to pay taxes like everybody else. You are not going to be allowed because they could have built a nuclear power plant in Disneyland and Florida couldn't have done a thing about it. I mean, that's how much power Disney had. And he said, you're all done. Because they came out and they were trying to indoctrinate children with an agenda that the parents were dead set against. And they are. But then now they really had their wings clipped. And on top of that, you have a bunch of people from all across the country voting with their feet, moving to Florida. Why Florida? It's hot there in the summertime.
Which is great. People of my skin pigment enjoy it.
Yeah, you notice my skin pigment doesn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
I like 72 degrees. Send me to North Carolina. I just love it. Okay, but anyway, the point is that he has created a situation where people have the most liberty, keep most of their money, and are business friendly, and welcome entrepreneurs. And those are the things you need to have a modern, successful economy.
Absolutely.
And that's what DeSantis is doing. And I absolutely he's my kind of guy. I like DeSantis.
So you were making a connection between DeSantis and what's her name? Danielle Smith. Danielle Smith. And you said how they remind you of each other in terms of their initiatives and their motives and where they're going.
Yep.
Now, how can you spin that into Canada, Canada on a whole? How she can move the economy? Is she trying to open up Alberta now? Because whoever was in there before was doing a terrible job
Well,
of
that was the NDP under Rachel Notley. And Rachel Notley was, for all intents and purposes, a communist. She was anti-business. She was, and when I say pro-union, I don't mean to say that we should not have unions and we should not have the ability of people to associate with any group they want to, as long as they're not undermining the country. Like I wouldn't want neo-Nazis running around having beer hall meetings like they did in Munich during the 1920s.
How do you stop that? Because that's what we're going through right now. As you talk about unions, they're run by a bunch of Nazis. You know, either you have them or you don't. We tried having them, and here we are, 2023.
No,
now.
I look. I've been part of a union on on at least one occasion, and the part that bothered me, and here's the answer to your question, the part that bothered me about belonging to a union was that I was compelled. I had no choice. In order to work for this particular company, I had to become a member of the union. And I also had to spit out $40 a week or a month. I can't. Let's say a month. $40 a month for union dues, which didn't do me any good at all. It was money that was just gone.
It's like having insurance. It doesn't mean anything until you need it.
Yeah, but even then, when you are expecting it to stand up, like, but while we had the Canadian Auto Workers Union before it was changed to something else, I forget. There was a gentleman by the name of Buzz Hargrove who was head of the Canadian Auto Workers Union back in the 1990s, 2000s, early 2000s, in there somewhere. The unions went on strike at GM. Okay, one of the biggest automotive manufacturers in the world. And they had a plant in Windsor, Ontario, where I was living. Well, I wasn't living in Windsor, but I was close enough to it. I worked for a company that hauled freight back and forth between the plants. I was a truck driver at the time. And they went on strike, and Buzz Hargrove would present himself on the strike line saying, "Hang in there, boys. And he didn't say this verbatim. This is what I took out of it. We'll see how much less we can get you to do and how much more we can get you paid for doing it." On top of that, he was making $250,000 a year drawing full pension, while the rest of us were on strike pay at $100 a week. So, yeah, sure, it didn't matter to him how long the strike took, because he was getting his full pension anyway. And his answer to that was, well, that's what you pay me for. Well, then maybe we should fire you and stop doing that, because we're not getting anywhere. And one of the demands was the fact that GM, the unions, first of all, if you went into the plant, I have a particular plant in mind on Tecumseh Road, it was a transmission plant. And when I pulled in there one day, and there wasn't a soul around. The floors were like mirrors. The place was absolutely spotlessly clean. Am I saying that bad? No, that's not a bad thing. Who wouldn't want to work in conditions like that? Mm-hmm. But I couldn't find anybody. And it was 2:00 in the afternoon in the middle of the week.
What year was this?
Oh, this would be 1990, let's say 95. That way I can't be wrong more than my 5 years.
And we had an economic downturn in the 80s, wasn't it? So it's
15, did we ever?
15 years just
did we ever?
That. Okay.
So finally, after 45 minutes, I had a truck and a trailer. I was supposed to live unload the trailer, which meant back in, they unload it, and I bring the trailer back to the yard. And after 45 minutes of walking around the plant looking, I finally find a guy who's reading a newspaper. He's got his feet up on the desk, and he's the only guy I can find. And I said, I'm here from XYZ company, and I need this trailer unloaded. It's a live unload. We got to get it back to the yard. We need the trailer. He said, "Nope, sorry, can't help you." I said, "What do you mean you can't help me? You're just sitting there." He said, "No, I've unloaded my trailer in a half this shift. I'm done. And we don't change shifts for another 45 minutes, so you're going to have to wait an hour at least." I said, "Well, in that case, show me where the forklift is. I'll do it myself." And he put his paper down, and he looked at me right in the eye, and he said, "If you lay one finger on that lift truck. I will call a wildcat strike and shut this plant down, and your boss is going to have a decision to make. He's either going to fire you and keep the contract or keep you and lose the contract. Which do you think he's going to do? As far as I know, that trailer's still there. So I don't have much use for unions. There's more union stories I could tell you about. But the point was, I still don't have a problem with people getting together to bargain collectively. Mm-hmm. Okay, so one man does the bargaining for everybody, or a team of negotiators. That's fine, because what you're doing is you're setting up the conditions under which you will be employed. And when you sit down and somebody says, look, I'm willing to pay you $15 an hour to do this particular job, and you can either say, yes, that's fine, and sign the line and go to work. Or you say, no, I want more than that. I want 18.
It's interesting that you say that, talk about how the union come into play and how who the regional union representative is. I'm not sure the company you're talking about. Is it Teamsters?
Oh, yeah, it was absolutely okay. Teamsters. So, that's not a company, that's a union.
So when this Judge Annalise Torres, she's the one actually involved in the Ripple SEC case right now, why they're in court. Back in, I don't remember what year it was, but under her watch, through Biden, they had changed the way that the government had done their voting. Before, it was we would vote for, and not we, but in the States, they would vote for the individual person themselves, and that person themselves would then run for said office. Now you have to vote for the collective party, the caucus. What's up? I gotta take a pee. Okay, let's pause this. Okay, you go.
That's the beauty of doing a in the can rather than a live podcast.
I don't edit anything, man. I'm gonna keep going with this here.
You can go right ahead.
Yeah, so Nick will get back here and we'll come back with that. He gave me the tea. But what I want to talk about today, I was watching XRP Vail, and I haven't read this, I haven't confirmed this myself. What he was talking about is the G7. In May, in his birthday, they are ready to sit down and have a conversation in terms of global crypto adoption at that point. So for global crypto adoption, and who the G7 is, that's the biggest thing there. Who the G7 is, now we're talking about the NATO countries here. We're talking about Canada. We're talking about US. We're talking about, I guess, what used to be Mexico. Well, anyways, Europe, we're talking about Europe. We're talking about the big NATO allies here. And these are the ones that are looking to sit down, have that conversation about cryptocurrencies in terms of regulation. Now, let me move closer to this mic and get comfortable here. So, we already have documents on the G20 talking about cryptocurrencies. They're using distributed ledger technology. And we have CBDCs coming into play. For you guys that don't know, CBDCs are central bank digital currencies. I got all decked out for you today in my Spidey outfit. CBDCs are central bank digital currencies, and those are the central bank reserves itself. So in terms of reserves, they will be backed by a tangible asset, which is known as the reference asset. And then we have stable coins, which the IMF and I guess other authorized regulators view the stable coins now, global stable coins, as a bank in and of itself. So you have the central bank digital currency backed by the physical asset here. You have that what moves the value of that, this bank-like substance, which is an agnostic bridge currency to move the value of this. So what I'm expecting to come through during this time of regulation is the regulation on what CBDCs are. And CBDCs are going to be through literally on their own rail itself. Not their own rail, it's through the rails of these agnostic bridge currencies. But what they're calling this is the RLN, the Regulated Liability Network. For banks to issue money or currency, it presents that individual bank with a liability itself now. And the liability is the CBDC, which moves globally on the agnostic bridge currency or the agnostic bridge highway, whatever you want to call it. What I know it as is the global bridge currency that's known as XRP. Again, this is just my speculation based off of what I learned. I'm not a financial advisor, so no financial advice. I'm a grown-ass man in a Spider-Man costume, literally a Spider-Man costume, Spider-Man shirt, Rasta beads, and a new Spider-Man hoodie right here, all right? That's who I am. I'm a 40-year-old in a grown-ass Spider-Man suit here. I got Nick over here laughing at me because he knows it's the truth. So now that we have that regulated liability network coming in, it's interesting to see how things will be regulated within this network, because you have on the Stellar network they have inclusive, which offers CAAS, which is compliance as a service. Compliance to what at that point? And compliance to who? Thank you. Who are you complying with? What entities are you complying with? I just learned about a new regulating body called the is it the WBC, the World Business Council. All right, I've never heard of this entity, and I was going to look them up prior to coming here, but I went out for a run. I had taken my adopted dog, not my adopted dog, but I have my friend's dog I'm looking after for the past 2 months here. I had taken him for a run. Terrible runner, by the way, not me, but him. So I'm good to switch seat if you want, and we can continue what we were talking about there. As I was going on my rant, I honestly don't even remember what we were talking about. I would I would rewind, but you can't live rewind anymore. But I'm here just kind of raving and ranting on what, like, how these entities, standard setting bodies, are looking to bring in the rails of stable coins, central bank digital currencies,
we were
and
talking about
cryptocurrency.
socialism and social programs, and this is another symptom of socialism. They want to regulate everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's, I think that, to be fair, this is what happens. People lose their freedoms. Adolf Hitler said in his book Mein Kampf that in order to imprison a population, you first take their freedoms away a little at a time so they don't notice it, until it gets to a point where there is no remedy. And I'm no fan of Hitler by any stretch, but he is and I know that there's a lot of people out there who aren't going to like this, but he's a creature of the left. He's a creature of socialism. And I keep hearing, oh, he's a right-wing fanatic. No, he wasn't right-wing. There was nothing right-wing about the man. His party alone, the name, the National German Workers' Socialist Party, should give you a hint that he didn't like capitalism. He regulated everything. And you can say, yeah, well, he was a mass murderer, but at least he gave us the Autobahn. Well, here's a news flash. They probably could have given the Autobahn anyway without him. So when you see things like, and I'm not trying to say these people are Hitler. Hitler was a unique monster. And let's hope we never see his like again. But at the same time, there are certain things that kind of make you remember some of the things, or want to learn more about what happens under socialism, and why it's such an evil method of trying to control a population, because it does not allow for the freedom of the individual. There's no room for exploration of new ideas unless they're condoned by the government. So that leads back into your whole crypto argument about why is it that some governments or some agencies want to control it? Because if you control it, then you can tax it.
Well, the saying goes, I care not who makes the rules and laws.
J.P. Morgan, yes.
Give me the money, and I'll control the world.
Or was that a Rothschild?
I don't remember who said that.
It was a Rothschild or J.P.
But
Morgan said,
just,
I care not who writes the laws. I only care who controls the banks.
Mm-hmm. Let me talk to them. But just going back to Hitler, in regards to Hitler, a lot of people might oppose me for this, but I actually have no point of view on Hitler. I haven't read enough. I haven't learned enough. I've only learned and understand what I've been told about it. Does that make sense? Like, I'm getting other people's projections of what they believe to be. I don't want to create my bias based off of what other people believe. I want to learn about that on my own, kind of like cryptocurrency, because I can, again, talk to anybody I want and they can teach me stuff, but until I do my own research based off of what I learn.
Well, here's where you start if you want to get into Hitler. 10 million people killed through the most barbaric means possible in concentration camps, and the physical evidence for that is undeniable. So from that point alone, he's a monster. and is not to be edified. Now, I am an amateur historian. Now, I'm no expert by any stretch. There's plenty about everything from military history that I don't know. I do know more than the average person, though. A lot of people, when I say, well, what's the defining moment in Canadian history? They have no idea. That was the Battle of the Plains of Abraham. Because France lost and England won, we became an English colony, or Quebec became an English part of the English colonies in the United States, in Canada, and we adopted the British way of doing things through our government, through our court system, common law, the Magna Carta. All that stuff is a legacy of that victory, and it's what separates Canadian history from North American history. Most people have no idea.
I know.
See?
So you're talking about control here and governments and regulators, and I care not who writes the legislation. Give me the banks or give me the money and I'll control the world. These banks are doing just that. Not even just the banks, it's the high level individuals. For instance, Financial Stability Board, you have the FATF, Financial Action Task Force, you have the central banks globally speaking, you have the various entities, new bodies and old bodies that have been set up. Again, the World Business Council, you have the World Gold Council, you have all these councils and entities, and they make new platforms to confuse people going on. But the main thing and only thing they ever speak openly of is Bitcoin and Ethereum. Bitcoin is, I guess I want to say, or I will suggest and say, one of the most decentralized platforms in terms of cryptocurrencies. A lot of the Bitcoin maximalists won't call it a cryptocurrency; they call it something else. But a cryptocurrency is a cryptocurrency is a cryptocurrency. They all have their particular function. So now I've heard regulators state, and I've read their documents as well, these official documents stating that this particular entity, Bitcoin, will not be used. It doesn't go with the narrative in terms of the green economy. Bitcoin works off of proof of work, which means that you need computers with high output and energy use to mine that next block. And I can't verify this other than what I've read, is that it has it put its output in terms of energy can be compared to Korea. Like, that's a lot of energy, should that be true. And this information comes from credible sites.
Are you talking about North or South Korea?
I don't know.
That would be, because North Korea is not putting out much but ballistic missiles.
Well, that's a lot of energy. Maybe they have Bitcoin mining from ballistic missiles, shooting over to Japan, man. But yeah, then you have other currencies that meet the green narrative as well. But what they can't do is regulate Bitcoin, so to speak, because it's been given a pass or clarity in terms of it's a commodity. And then you have this other cryptocurrency called Ethereum, which has been given a free pass, if you will. You had an individual, Jay Clayton. He worked for the SEC, a lawyer, I believe, a legal firm, and he had sued the company before he left that company, and then he went again, closed door meetings, went and got a job with the FDIC at this point. So now he's on the global insurance portion, and now the individual who's in this court case still, Gary Gensler, I call him Gerber Gensler. Meanwhile, he's an he's an active regulator on the Financial Stability Board through their steering committee. And the steering committee is exactly that. It steers the direction of recommendations with how we want things to go. So not only is he the judge, he's also the executioner in this. Quite interesting when you learn where people move in this game of chess, huh?
It is.
I can tell by your reaction, though, that you're like, huh.
Well, the thing is, you know a lot more about this than I do. You've done a lot more homework. I'm more of a political animal than you are, and but it's interesting when you start to mesh the two together.
Mm-hmm.
So there's still plenty for me to learn. As far as cryptocurrency is concerned, and by that I'm using it in the royal generic sense, whether it be Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple, who knows.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there is opportunity here for people to take advantage of the work that people like you have done to get ahead of the curve.
Thank you.
So they're not they don't get swept up in this wall of pain that's coming. They can kind of ride over it, because when you have, and I'll use the generic term of money, however you want to, quantify that, whether it be electronic or physical cash or assets or whatever it is, it gives you options.
Mm-hmm.
If you, like, you can't get a job from a broke guy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but if you have enough money, you don't need a job. So if you have, this is why some of the wealthiest people in the world are able to go around on massive yachts, by private jets. They have invested enough in enough different fields that their daily efforts do not have any impact on their income.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's a bad thing, as it's something we should all aspire to. Because while, yes, we need people to run the machinery that runs the economy, like we need people to run backhoes, we need people to put in septic systems, we need people to build buildings. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be you. You just have to have the ability to employ those people to do what you want. And I think that's good for everybody.
So where do you think that's bringing us in terms of future now, with things being automated and digitized? I mean,
Automation
people
can only carry you so far.
Well, people will still have jobs. Yeah, I mean, people will still be able to operate these machinery and this artificial intelligence until it reaches a point where it can be, beyond the Bambi effect on the ice trying to stand up. It'll be able to walk at this point, and after you walk, you begin to run, and you grow with that. So essentially, there will be a point in artificial intelligence, whatever it's called at that point. Synthetic intelligence. I don't know the terms, but I mean, it'll have its own legs to stand on at that point. We're just in the cutting edge of it still. But I say cutting edge, but it's been here for quite some time.
Well, artificial intelligence got started with your first calculator. You're right, it's not new.
Mm-hmm.
What it'll look like, if you remember, maybe you're too young, but there was a cartoon called The Jetsons.
Oh, yes. Remember the Jetsons.
Guess what year that was set in?
What year was that set in?
2000.
That's it? Oh, man.
You go back and watch The Jetsons, and they're talking about, because it was made in the 50s.
Very good point.
That was made 50 years, well, 50s is what, 70, 80 years ago now. So if you go back and watch those episodes, many of the things in that are already true and are part of our daily lives. And yet we still have a very large blue collar element to our society. Like the idea of a flying car was a fantasy in the 1950s. It's been a fantasy for a long time. You know what we're on the verge of? Flying cars.
Mm-hmm.
Literally. What made that possible? The big problem with flying cars, and I'm going down a rabbit hole here, was that you couldn't control. You had 4 fans that would keep the car up, okay, because they weren't this little tailpipe going and Jetson flying through the air. You had this square, and on the corner of each square, on each corner of the square was a big fan, and they could rotate like this to give you forward momentum. They could rotate back to slow you down, flat, and then speed up or slow down until take off or land. The problem was you couldn't control.
Didn't have the lateral movement, huh?
They had the lateral movement. They had everything, but they couldn't control the engine speeds accurately enough to keep it from doing this.
Oh, they didn't have them timed then?
Yeah,
oh,
it was
okay.
the timing of the speed of the engines. So once they invented the microchip and they began to have faster and faster computer processors, now you can make 1 million decisions a second about how fast that fan's supposed to run. And all of a sudden now everything's a lot more stable. Most of our modern combat aircraft would have been physically, even if they had the technology in the 1950s, would have been physically impossible to reproduce. The B-2, I think, is completely unflyable if you tried to fly it by yourself without the aid of computers. The F-35 is the same way. It's so sophisticated that a human being cannot fly it on its own. It has to have computer input to correct for the mistakes the pilot's making.
Do you know where the largest amount of microchips is made in this world?
Yeah,
Singapore.
That's right, and that's why China wants Taiwan. You want to talk about reasons for a war? Because if China ever gets a hold of Taiwan and takes 90% of the chip market off the market,
That'll be interesting to see how that plays
that
out.
would be a disaster.
So that being said, I think that alone is a catalyst for the next potential world war. And I believe we are going to see that sometime soon. Because for these banking deals to be made, and this isn't a conspiracy theory by any means, you'll always notice whenever there's a war, there's bankers frolicking in the background.
Okay, well here's what let me draw on a little bit of my understanding of the Chinese military, the Americans, the Japanese, the Australians, the Taiwanese. China would be committing suicide as it stands right now to try to cross that strait.
How so?
First of all, you have any time China has to cross water, they have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't they invade North America?
I don't know.
Can't get here. You've got the U.S. 7th Fleet. You've got the Australian military. You've got the Japanese, because everything moves by water. You cannot, even if you took massive cargo airplanes and stuffed the Japanese army along with its equipment into, the world's biggest aircraft and flew them across the ocean, there's things called SAMs that would rip them to shreds.
I don't know, man.
I do.
I have to disagree, and I want to go. I know the reason I want to disagree is just based off of what China's military is doing now. By no means do I know much about military army movements and their operation.
Just think of it
But
from
in
a
terms
logistical point of view.
Yeah, logistically speaking, now that they're combined with Russia and the whole BRICS nations, they have their ecosystem as the BRICS nation trumps what NATO can offer.
No,
Any of our allies just completely
I
trumps it.
think if you look, never mind the politics of Ukraine, look at the military performance in Ukraine. How well is Russia doing?
Russia's doing really good from what I see.
They're about to get their asses kicked.
From whose point of view are you looking from? Like
From
which
the
which
West.
which media do you follow for that?
Okay. First of all, when you look at losses, and look, nobody, unless you're on the ground there, you have to pick and choose your sources. And
Yep.
I have more than just the mainstream media that I can pick from. Okay, I have a friend of mine who runs a blog, who has people in Estonia, who has people scattered all over the world feeding him information on a daily basis.
So he gets fed information then. But how does he verify that information? Because that could be biased depending on what he
It
picks.
could
and
be,
chooses.
but he's been doing this for over 20 years and he trusts his sources. And he's never been wrong that I've ever seen.
Okay, I can't give that a free pass in my head, just for my own OCD on how that chain of connection works. I'm being for real here.
That's
but
okay.
I want to continue that though.
But my point is that I have used him many times in my own broadcast and in my own research, and I've never known him to be wrong. And on the very rare, I'm sure he has been, but even if he thinks he's wrong, he will print a retraction and say, okay, I got that wrong. Here's the real scenario. Because he cares more about getting the truth out than he does about inflating his own ego, which
that's
drives
noble.
a lot of the media. Okay, it's all ego driven. I want to be the guy who breaks his story. I want to be the network that brings the truth to the people filtered through my...
Man, that exists in like
I know it does.
cryptocurrency, like everywhere. It's
Of
just,
course it does. That's human nature. But I'll call him Bob for lack of a better term, because I don't have his permission to give out his name in this
Understood,
scenario. But he's the kind of guy that I know him personally. He's been to my home. I've spent time in his home. Met many of the people that he's been talking to, and when he tells me something, I trust it implicitly. So, from that, Ukraine is receiving 400 or 500 modern Western main battle tanks. The Leopard 2, the Leopard, the Challenger, and the Abrams. I'm not going to get into any more specific than that. I don't know how technically up to speed your audience is on military hardware, so just the 3 main battle tanks of the Western world.
And who are they getting this from? Is this
They're
not
getting
help
from Germany, from the United States,
from NATO?
Yeah, from NATO. They're getting 4 from us, from Canada. What a joke!
Yeah, but Canada's military military vehicles is completely outdated.
The Leopard isn't.
You know,
The Leopard is the one. The Leopard and the new artillery we have is the best in the world. The problem is we don't have enough of it.
I wish I had my son-in-law here to talk about this. He's in the military, and this guy can talk for days on this. I think you and him would have an awesome
Ask them
conversation.
about the Leopard A2
Leopard A2.
with
That's
the
a type
upgraded
of
turret.
tank. Is
That's
it?
what we have.
Okay.
Ask them how good it is, and then ask them about the 777s, which is the artillery that we use.
Okay.
Now, you want to talk about fighter planes? You're absolutely right. The F-18 has been out. They is 50 years old. I watched it first fly in 1978. It's been in the air for Canada for at least that long.
In terms of aviation, the planes we were looking to get in Canada, we're sending that over to Ukraine itself. There's a lot of things that are happening in
Yeah, but not
Ukraine.
the fighters.
I believe it is the fighters. I do believe that. I
That's
remember.
news to me. I didn't know we were sending any aircraft over. I knew we were sending tanks and artillery, but I didn't know about aircraft.
Let me just confirm that I remember sending my son-in-law a article about this,
Right.
so I can have have a look at that
I
off
don't know
camera
why
afterwards.
they'd want them. They've got better aircraft over there. And I love the Hornet. I think it's an amazing plane, just like I love the Spitfire. But I wouldn't take a Spitfire into combat today.
Oh hell no, man.
Yeah, well, guess what? I wouldn't take an F-18 into combat today either.
Well, we have no option though.
Yeah, that's the point. Yeah, we don't want to, so I don't see why they'd send them, because they would be a liability. They're just too old.
So speaking of Ukraine, let's just continue on that with the
Sure.
whole Ukraine thing now. You heard of FTX, the cryptocurrency exchange that had collapsed, and
Yes,
a lot
yes.
of banks had invested in this. And
Yeah,
there's
this
a
is what
contagion now
burned
going on.
Pierre Polyev.
And how so?
Well, he was the one saying invest in crypto, and then the market went.
Oh,
for a dump.
okay, because he was talking about crypto.
Yeah.
I
He
wouldn't.
wanted people to invest in it.
I wouldn't necessarily say FTX is cryptocurrency. That's just an exchange to that facilitates the onboarding of cryptocurrency. But
Yeah, but
it's
people in
not.
the House of Commons don't care about that.
You know what? I believe they know more than they lead on to these things.
Yeah, but they spin it in a way that makes it politically expedient for them to make it look like he was giving bad advice.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
So
I agree with that. But just back on Ukraine, Allison and I stumbled on this information which has to do with dates. Allison's Nick's wife.
my wife.
I don't know if you, should I not have said that? Either way. Okay.
That's how we say it. She's my wife. I'm her husband.
So I had shown Allison documents that had to do with the NBU, National Bank of Ukraine, in partnership with Tascom Bank out in I want to say Ukraine as well, in partnership with Stellar and USDC. USDC is a stable coin which rides or utilizes the rail of the XLM infrastructure. XLM is a coin created by Stellar.
Okay.
What XLM operates is an interoperable medium of exchange. It's agnostic as well. It can change to any currency that needs to change into. For instance, you have USDC, which is a digital currency. You can offboard it out to a fiat currency. You have Europe has their the Euroc stablecoin can convert to that. So it can convert to assets that you needed to convert it to when you needed to convert it to. They've started or created this initiative back in 2021. I'm sure they had the blueprints leading up to the go live or the implementation dates of this. I'm sure they would have had closed meetings surrounding that. So now they're using this setup here to issue out. Oh my nephew's calling me to issue out USDC, which is a US digital dollar stablecoin, out to the Ukrainian refugees.
Yes.
So this is a means of a proof of concept in terms of digital and cryptocurrencies here, and most people don't look at that. They're doing it in terms of not utilizing a central bank liability, say a CBDC. They just have the agnostic currency with a stable coin, essentially a US digital currency, which is interesting. So how does that, and the reason that works is because that currency, that US stable coin, has its own backing in the in the banks. So it'll have an equal amount of US fiat and say bonds and investments to give it the peg to the U.S. currency. So the U.S. currency and this digital currency is one-to-one backing. So it essentially is its own bank, as opposed to needing a central bank digital currency. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm following you. This is stuff that's outside my wheelhouse,
Yeah, yeah, it's out there for
but
sure.
it's certainly something that, I can see where this is how change will unfold in the next as we were talking about, in the next 4 or 5 years. What it's going to look like, I can't say, I can't speak to.
Yeah, yeah.
But speaking of Ukraine, I want people to understand that Ukraine is not some shining democracy.
Hell no, man.
Okay, just for people out there listening to me, it is run by a dictator. Zelensky
It's an
is
actor.
no Churchill by any stretch of the imagination. And to give you an idea why I say that, before the war started, he was actively involved in encouraging terrorism on ethnic Russians living within Ukraine, up to and including terrorist attacks on school buses. He banned all political parties inside the country, and he took control of the media. The only media allowed is stuff that prints mostly favorable stuff about him. There's a lot of other things about Zelensky I won't get into now, just because if that doesn't paint him as a dictator, nothing else I'm going to say will.
He's a puppet. Like he was an actor in Ukraine.
The problem with puppets like this is they begin to think they're bigger than their masters.
But you know what happens though? There's always pride before a fall, and because like their economy is is done, man. Like there's gonna be an economy after the fact,
was nothing to brag about before the war.
Well, I don't know how they're going to be afterwards, but because they are joining the EU now, and a flood of money is being sent out there on behalf of the Democratic Party.
What happens when it comes to an end?
I think it's going to be some kind of digital hub of sorts. That's what they're going after. I don't know how that looks and plays out.
The money in Ukraine was all black market. It was weapons. It was biological.
Bioweapons.
Like some countries are known for their grooming of terrorists. Other companies are known for drugs and diamonds. Other countries are known in this place. If you needed a suitcase bomb, the first place you go is Ukraine, because Ukraine was part of the former Soviet Union and had many, because it's a western end, on the western end of the country, had many nuclear missiles in it that were supposed to be decommissioned and destroyed. But when Ukraine separated, so did Russia's ability to, and I'm not painting Russia as a hero here. I'm just stating the facts, that a lot of these weapons, nobody really knows who has control of them. There are private biolabs over there doing who knows what. So this is not a country that was like, let's say, Holland, okay, overrun by the Germans in 1940, or France, or Belgium. Okay, we're not talking about countries like that. This is not a nice place to begin with. Now, does that mean I side with the Russians? Absolutely not. And the reason is, as poorly run as Ukraine was, it was still a sovereign country and has a right to its own self-defense. And when Putin came over the border with guns blazing, he became the bad guy. No matter what else you think about, that is the truth.
Why? Why did he become the bad guy? What was the invasion
Because you're
for?
not allowed to invade your neighbor with force.
But what was the invasion about, though?
Well, it depends on who you listen to. Okay? I've had people tell me that Putin tried everything he could on the world stage to rectify a problem because of the terrorism going on against the ethnic Russians in Ukraine. He went to the World Court, he went to The Hague, and tried to get this done diplomatically, and felt the only option he had left to protect these people. Now, maybe this is the same kind of mentality as Hitler used during World War II to invade Poland to protect or take over the Sudetenland to protect the ethnic Germans in there. In other words, just a straw dog. Maybe that's the case. But you have to at least go, so maybe there's two sides to this story. Maybe Russia is not just, filled with nothing but evil people. Maybe Putin has reasons we're not aware of that may change the way we look at the war. I don't know. But the day you roll over another, like if you and I are having a dispute, okay, we have courts for that. Okay, so let's say for something, I back into your car. Okay, we got two choices. We can either let the courts sort it out, let the insurance company sort it out, or we can come to blows and try to sort it out that way.
But that's the fallacy of it, right? You can't go to a court and expect the trillions upon trillions of dollars to be pumped out of the central banks at
Well,
that
this
point.
is why it's a
wars are
poor
for.
analogy. I get that, but the point I'm making is, with every conflict, there's always more than one side of the story, and we're only hearing one. And that's the part that's got me worried. Now, I do believe that Ukraine is gearing up to take back Crimea. And put yourself in Putin's shoes for a minute. Think about this. You've just had an arrest warrant issued by the World Court. Okay? You've got the whole world, other than China, okay, and Iran, against you. Now, China's a big guy to have in your corner. No mistaking that. Because it's on the continent, it's on the same piece of ground, so forces can travel without having to travel over the water and be subject to Western navies and air forces to get shredded on their way to where they're trying to go. So they could just, drive right to the battlefield. But if you're Putin and you feel cornered, I'm going to be arrested if I try to leave Russia. I'm losing the war, if you believe the West. I've got 200,000 casualties. I could put 5 or 6 million people in the field, but I'd have to put my country on a total war footing to do it. What's stopping me from saying, a tactical nuke might not be a bad idea? Because what have I got to lose? I'm dead anyway.
So you don't think the option for a nuke had existed long before where we are right now, though?
Well, it's always been an option.
Because Russia has the potential for it. They've always had that. Their submarines.
I agree with you. But understand this, that while it was an option, it wasn't one that was on the edge of the table ready to be used next. And today, I don't know that that's true anymore. What was it that kept people from using a tactical nuke on the battlefield?
I couldn't tell you.
The fear of escalating to a full-blown nuclear war. But if the guy with his finger on the button thinks I'm dead in a week anyway, what difference does it make to me? Push the button. It's, you know what? I don't know that I'm right. I pray to God I'm wrong.
It's a good theory, though. Definitely a good theory.
But you got to think about that. We're not giving him any place to go, because politics on the international stage is all about saving face. Okay, like the Japanese or the China, during the Japanese China, the what do they call it? The war between Japan and China in the 1930s. World War II started long before World War II started.
Oh yeah, the official dates mean nothing.
Well, when did World War II start? Well, it depends who you ask. If you ask the Chinese, it started in 1932 or 3. If you ask the Japanese, it started about the same time. If you ask the Russians, it didn't start till 1940. If you ask the Americans, it didn't start till 1941. If you ask the Poles, it started in 1939. All depends on who you're talking to. Okay, so it's a very ambiguous date that they pick. But if you're forced into a corner and there's no chance for you to save face, you've got nothing to lose. And a man who's got nothing to lose is a very, very scary individual. Because if he's got nothing to lose, there's nothing he won't do. So we pushed him into this corner, and now all of a sudden everybody's going, well, we're gonna get rid of Putin. Putin's in the thing. If I'm going out, I'm taking you with me. So these kind of things people have to slow down and think about. Why did Why did Biden tell Ukraine, we're with you till the end? Is he willing to put American troops on the ground in Ukraine to fight Russia? There's another name for that. It's called World War III.
Yeah, I see that. I see that coming to pass, and that's going
I
to
hope
involve
not.
China at that point. I mean, we're coming here full circle about the previous conversation we had about China and Russia and the BRICS nation, and now we're talking about Ukraine and I guess NATO allies being North America. And that if U.S. got sent, I couldn't foresee Canada not being too far behind.
Well,
You
we're
know?
a token player.
So,
As much as I hate to say it, we're a token player.
mm-hmm. Well, it's about 4:30 now. I did enjoy this conversation.
I have thoroughly enjoyed it.
And I feel like I'm losing weight just thinking about food because I gotta go start dinner here. So, and I'm not big by any means.
I'm going to start thinking that way too. Hopefully, it works for me.
The saying is right. You believe what you. How's it go again? I don't remember. Anyways, we manifest things that we believe in before it actually exists in our life. So if you believe that, you'll find a way to make it happen. Yeah.
I believe I'm hungry. All right.
All right. Well, I do appreciate this, Nick. Until the next time.
You bet.
All right,
was
guys.
my pleasure. I enjoyed it immensely.
I hope you guys enjoyed this show. We'll have to do this again. I do know that Nick is packing up in terms of his life. To him and his partner are getting ready to go and start a new journey in their life, and they're hopefully starting a YouTube channel here because what they got planned is going to be awesome. I'll give you guys a prequel into hopefully what they're going to follow through with doing. They are downsizing their life. They have this house here that we're in right now. They're in the process of remodeling some of the interior of it and selling that. And they just bought a boat, 47 foot?
48.
48 foot, and they're going to go have it ported out in Souk, BC, correct?
Out on the west coast, yeah.
Yep, and they're going to spend time on that boat, and that's where their primary house will be. So I'm excited.
Fly in the Skull and Bones.
Skull and Bones. As we talk about
The
Masons.
Jolly Roger is what I'm trying to say. Skull and Crossbones.
So should they decide to put this on YouTube here and document their life, I totally would follow that. You know, I would love to see how people, the beginning of that. I hope you too. I'd love to see how people start this life and end up where they end up in the end. So should that happen, I'll put a link into my description like always and keep you guys updated on Nick. And hopefully we do this again sometime soon.
You bet. All right. With that said, I'm going to sign off. Here's hoping that you have a great day. You have a wonderful weekend. And in the meantime, ubi caritas et amor, Deus ibi est. Good evening. God bless. Don't let anything disturb your peace, and may you have a fair wind in a following sea.
All right. So now I will stop and I can edit this part out here. Where's the escape button?
Escape's up in the upper left-hand corner.
Do you see it? Oh, there we go.